You're listening to the Fact Hunter Radio Network.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Flat Earth Files. As we record, it's March 9th, 2023, and we have another guest lined up for you tonight. Joining us is Brent. He reached out to us about 3 weeks ago, and he's a former Marine, and he's a truck driver, and we're going to bring him on now. Welcome aboard, Brent. How are you doing today?
Hey, good evening, George. I appreciate you having me on. I'm doing well. We're cooking over here in Arizona.
So it's already summer there.
Yeah. It's we just had a freak snowstorm, and believe it or not, I actually was able to get my truck stuck because we don't carry chains out here where I'm at.
Oh yeah, I would assume not. My goodness, yeah. I think California got bludgeoned with some pretty crazy weather in the last week or two as well.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was out of the ordinary for all of us. But out here, we call them Indian winters. It gets real nice, and then all of a sudden we have one more cold snap, and
yeah.
A little bit of snow to follow. But we're doing okay though out here. It'll be a good spring. So, anyways, yeah. So I want to go ahead and let you know here as far as how I kind of got, my eyes opened up to the truth. I've always kind of been sensitive to the goings on of the world at an early age. I was actually homeschooled all the way up to high school.
Oh wow!
And my mother was a teacher, and she decided to, I guess, put us kids' education before the public school system. So I am very thankful for that. So I would say probably the first time I really kind of started questioning everything probably goes back to, whenever I was 12 or 13. I was always kind of a bigger kid, a chunky kid, and I always was wondering, like, man, I need to slim down. I'm not eating a whole lot, and I'm exercising and this, that, and the other. I'm eating low fat stuff, and that would have been around the time that the Atkins diet really was kind of taking everything by storm.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that I remember the pushback that they got about how horrible it was, that you need carbohydrates and you need bread and, slim fast and all that. And I kind of questioned it. In fact, I got a lot of pushback from my family, especially being at such a young age, changing up my eating habits and, cutting out everything that they tell us to eat, like your cereals and pastas and all that.
Yes.
And so I went against the grain to include even the will there of my folks, and I had excellent results. And it really kind of got me wondering. I'm like, why would the food pyramid say that we got to have 11 to 13 servings or whatnot of carbohydrates, but yet all the stuff that I'm eating, that's at the top. That's the stuff you stay away from, your meats and your eggs and all that. And I just thought it was really, really interesting because, I played football, so I took physicals. I was always really healthy afterwards. And I really kind of found it interesting that something like that would not necessarily be hidden, but that we were given this information that really seemed kind of counterintuitive. So after I did that, I did sports, and I do remember really being intrigued by the universe. I used to love watching anything like Nova and anything on National Geographic about space and the outer limits and all that. I always thought it was really, really interesting. And I remember we had the opportunity with the homeschooler group to go to the observatory there in Northern Arizona University Observatory, and we got to go and see Saturn. Now, I remember all of us, we were super pumped and excited, and we're like, oh man, like we're going to finally see this thing in real life. And I tell you what, George, I remember getting there, and the whole place kind of seemed off. But the strangest thing is whenever we looked through their telescope, and I remember seeing Saturn, and it looked fake. It looked like sticker. There's no other way to put it. It looked like an animation. I'm not sure what it was, but I just remember I wasn't the only one that had that reaction to it. My mother was there, and even she said, "Wow, it almost doesn't look real." Now, I'm not saying whatever we saw was or wasn't an animation or a sticker, because like I said, it was at the observatory, but I always remember that something just kind of felt off about that. And that kind of always stuck with me, as I looked up there into the sky, and at night, out here in Arizona, you can always see the stars and whatnot. And I was gazing up there and thinking something always felt a little funny. Along being a homeschooled, child up until high school, we're also a Christian family. And so I do remember my mother, as well as I always enjoyed listening to Kent Hovind and Ken Ham.
Sure, yeah.
I'm not familiar with those guys. In fact, I got the opportunity to go to a debate between Kent Hovind and one of the professors at the local community college. And that was really interesting. But I always, kind of questioned even evolution and everything that was taught with us on how we evolved and the age of the world and how we became, a species as we are now. And none of it really added up. So I definitely questioned that aspect of our origins. And I was like, well, the Bible says that God created, the heavens and the earth and all the animals and all that. And so that always stuck with me. But I always kind of wondered, how could people fall for such a ridiculous notion about us being billions of years old and coming up out of a primordial ooze. And I always thought that was a little bit of a head scratcher. Some of the other things that I thought was interesting too is I love dinosaurs, man. I remember seeing the original Jurassic Parks in movie theaters, and yet again, just like with the mainstream books or National Geographic and Discovery Channel, they would talk about dinosaurs, but it was really interesting because that was really before the premise where they tried to equate dinosaurs as being related to birds. It was kind of like a loose connection, but it's interesting now to see over the past 25 years, how they have now implemented dinosaurs and birds being direct ancestors, even through the movie, even the latest Jurassic Park, they got all the dinosaurs now running around with feathers. And, but watching that transitional phase over the course of 25, 26 years, from it was mainstream that dinosaurs were, reptiles, and they might have had some sort of connection to birds, and now they all, look like chickens with sharp teeth.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting, So as I went through school and I went to high school, I kind of would get pushback here and there with my beliefs with creation. And I always had a really firm base, so I always came back to it. And I think that it was really beneficial, to have that, my faith to always lean back on. And that especially played into whenever I went into the Marine Corps. I enlisted at the age of 18. I remember 9/11 when I was a kid, and I was always real patriotic. And I remember there was one of my teachers specifically, my English teacher. She was always kind of questioning, like George Bush and 9/11, and I do remember that I always looked at her in an unpatriotic light. because she was going counter to the narrative. So I was very patriotic. I really wanted to serve my country, and actually originally I was trying to get into the Army, but lo and behold, by the time I got down to MEPS, they said there were some issues, and so I was going to be an MP, and they're like, well, because this, that, and the other, you can't be an MP, but we got track mechanic open, and
oh wow,
I was like, I don't want to spend the next 4 years.
Ooh, that is some hard work, man. I've been around track that's broken in the middle of the desert, and that's just the worst.
Oh yeah,
Oh, my goodness.
that was my thoughts exactly. So
good, smart move, very smart move.
I was a little bummed at first, and I was like, well, the Lord, He opens doors and He closes them, and I thought, well, maybe this just isn't for me. And Providence has it, that a Marine Corps recruiter called me literally the evening I got back from MEPS, and he was like, hey, have you ever thought about joining the Marine Corps? And I was like, well, what do you got to offer me? And I always remember he says, the only bonus we give out is the ability of yourself to call yourself a United States Marine. I was like, okay, let's go talk shop. And that's what I ended up doing. So I enlisted into the Marine Corps, and the program that I did, we would do several rapid deployments, but most of the time they were under 6 months or so. And so whenever I really, really kind of started getting this itch to, about our realm, is I do remember on my first overseas deployment or station, if you will, it was in Guantanamo Bay, and we were there for site security there on the base, and one of the posts that I manned was right there overlooking the Caribbean Sea. And, we would have to go in and call different reports in about movements or anything that we saw, or ships or shipping vessels or whatever.
Right.
But I just remembered that it was really interesting that I would be scanning with my optics, and I remember being able to see ships out in the distance. And then I, draw my binoculars down, and well, now they're gone, and you pull them back up, and it's like, well, holy cow, that's definitely, a large tanker vessel, probably coming in from Venezuela or something, bringing them oil.
Right.
And I thought it was the most interesting thing. And I always thought, like, well, wait a minute. I've always been, taught to, even include with my home education, that we live on a ball. And with that ball, there comes curvature. And one of the telltale signs and things that we know that we do live on a ball is that ships disappear over the horizon. And I couldn't shake it that I would, be seeing these different boats off in the distance, coming and going and coming into view. And then when they were going out to sea, they would go over the quote unquote curve. But yet, as soon as I brought up my optics, they were, clear as day. And I always thought that was very, very thought-provoking, and no one could ever really give me a definitive answer why. It was always something like mumbo-jumbo about refraction, this, that, and the other. And I was like, I kind of took him like, okay, well, I still think it's weird.
Sure. Now, before you go on, I've got a bunch of notes, so before we get too far, I've marked we're at Gitmo when we can see too far. I want to go back and ask you a few questions if I can.
Yes, sir.
The first thing, I laughed. The old food pyramid is so broken, and I remember, man, I used to eat so much cereal. I would love to sit down, and I think I was having a bowl of like Honey Nut Crunch or something, or Honey Nut Cheerios, one of those, Raisin Bran Crunch, maybe it was. And when my wife's like, hey, have you ever looked at the side? And it had more sugar than like Count Chocula, Fruity Pebbles. And I'm like, what is going on? I thought of this time I was eating healthy, right? It was just insane.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of those cereals, they're like your, especially your quote unquote healthy cereals, like your Honey Bunches of Oats, or any of your, quote energy heart healthy cereals, like you said, you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, there's more sugar in this than a candy bar per serving.
Yeah, it's like no wonder I'm borderline diabetes. What's going on? I eat cereal. You're taught, and that's a great point. I don't know how many people I've spoken to over the years that started their awakening through the food pyramid, but that is something that has come up in conversations with people before about the food pyramid, about how broken it was in the 80s and 90s for sure. The second thing was you brought up Kent Hovind and Ken Ham, is that the other guy's name?
Correct. Yeah, Kent Hovind and then Ken Ham. I believe Ken Ham is a doctor, if I remember right.
Yeah,
paleontology.
I think you're right. I heard some just popped up on my algorithm last week when I was driving around, and I can't remember. It was either Ham or Hovind that went on a complete 5-minute tirade about flat Earth.
Really?
Yeah.
As far as dissenting or in favor?
Oh, against it.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, he really went off. I've got to go back and find it in my playlist. It was sometime last week. They really went off on it. And then he tried to even say that it was dividing the congregation.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't it really disappointing?
It really is. Especially, I mean, those guys get so much criticism. I mean, like I said, the debate that I went to, whenever, like I said, I'm 98% sure it was Kent Hovind, but he debated one of the professors, and they were, like I said, evolution, creation, and I mean, even in small town Arizona, USA, I mean, there was a lot of people that were ripping into Kent Hovind, and I mean, he's a very resilient man, but like I said, it's interesting that they have not looked into, really it'd be biblical Earth, the way that I look at it.
Exactly. That's how Josh from Founded Earth Brothers and Dustin Nemos, they basically biblical Earth. That is the correct way to put it. And that's another tool in the toolbox to kind of keep people, when you mention it to somebody, without them getting all, are you crazy?
Right.
It softens the blow. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, there's while we're talking about biblical Earth, there's actually, I'm not sure if you've seen the video on YouTube. It's, let me see. It's 40 Bible verses proving the flat Earth, and it's there on YouTube. And there is several, I remember reading them in the Bible, like either at Sunday school or whenever my folks would. And, talking about things like the firmament, or like how the earth is, the Lord is like the earth, immovable. And it's right there, the verse that talks about the four corners of the earth, it's like, well,
no corners on a ball.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's what I always thought. And I'm like, was that metaphorical or what is it? It's like, well, if we're going to go and, take everything to truth, like we really got to look down and analyze those.
What was the next question? How was your transition? For kindergarten through 8th grade, you were in homeschool. How was your transition into high school?
So my transition into high school, it was a little bit challenging. I've always considered myself an extrovert, but I did kind of get mixed into the wrong group of kids there, and just kind of trying to find my way. I unfortunately did realize that whenever kids were bad or whatever, and they got the attention, that I thought that maybe it was cool. But I found out early on in my freshman year that that's kind of dumb. So I course corrected real quick. But like I said, I integrated fairly well into my sophomore and junior year, and like I said, once I got my sights set on joining the military, like I had told you before previously, that originally I wanted to join the Army. Playing with GI Joes, and then as I got older, playing Army video games like the Delta Force or Medal of Honor, those kinds of things. I always thought, man, it would be cool and patriotic and really to be a part of something bigger than myself, and to really kind of test my limits as a man, and to go forth and to give it my best run there in the military. And so I knew probably in my sophomore into my junior year that that's what I wanted to do. And I do remember, interestingly enough, my counselors and teachers and all that, and well, why do you want to go and join the military? Like, that's where all the dum-dums go to. Like, you need to get yourself into a college and get your SATs and ACTs done. And I just remember telling them, like, first off, I don't even know what I'd want to do in college. Like, why would I want to go and get myself in oodles amounts of debt into a degree that I had no interest in getting in the first place? And so they did discourage me quite a bit. But as I had mentioned before, my English teacher, who was very, very against the war, specifically the invasion of Iraq, kind of, made me reevaluate and really look into if this is what I wanted to do. But I know that back then the propaganda was strong. Before the Iraq invasion, I remember them talking about weapons of mass destruction and terrorists. It's like there's a terrorist hiding behind every street corner and this, that, and the other. And yeah, as a kid, it's like it was kind of a little bit nerve-wracking, but then at the same time, it propelled that purpose of wanting to serve and to protect my country. But looking back now, it was no different than COVID. It's interesting. I remember, in 2000, back whenever the whole Y2K scare happened, parents got flashlights and canned beans and ready to rock and roll for Y2K. And,
that's right.
Yep. When the ball dropped, we were waiting for everything to go out, and like, oh, I guess nothing's happening. But man, I remember that they really, really played up the whole Y2K scare, that it was going to be like a Mad Max scenario. And then, like I said, moving on into 9/11, there's a terrorist behind every street corner, and that, the anthrax scare and this, that, and the other. And, being able to kind of reflect back on that, it's like, holy cow, how the heck did we manage to let them play that again on us with the COVID stuff?
It's amazing, isn't it? Hindsight 2020, but I think that was a very good comparison, comparing what goes on in the military-industrial complex, at the same type of playbook that is in play with the medical-industrial complex. They have an enemy. They give it a vague name. It's this invisible enemy, right? And the war on terror is an invisible enemy. They'll put faces up and things, but when we took out the enemy, Osama bin Laden, who was reported dead on Fox News December 25th, 2001, we continued for another 10 years or so in Afghanistan. So it's just, all of this is about making the richer and the more powerful. They just keep wedging the gap between the wealthy and the folks like you and I.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that really kind of boggled my mind whenever I did, get into the Marine Corps, and after I went through, boot camp and my other following schools. Like, first off, just the massive infrastructure. I think in my mind, whenever I would think bases, you think of old World War II movies when they've got tents and everyone's eating T-rats. It's like, no, it's like they're full on cities. These bases, like, they've got their own fire department, their own DFAC chow halls,
yep.
The cyber cafes, the MWRs, the whole 9 yards.
They got gyms, world-class gyms.
World-class gyms, absolutely.
Yep.
Olympic swimming pools. And it's not just at one base, it's at all of them.
Yep. You go to Camp Liberty, Camp Victory, you go to Mosul up there. You had Balad, which was a little city in itself. I don't know if you've spent any time there, flying in and out of there.
No, I did not. So, like I said, all the only base that I could say was whenever I did go to Afghanistan, that it fit a little bit more with what I had envisioned. We flew into Camp Bastion, which was south of Leatherneck. But the duration of my deployment there, we were at a small combat outpost where it was gritty, bottled water showers,
Yep.
Taking IDF, pop shots, that kind of thing. We did a lot of like route clearance and security patrols and whatnot, working with the ANA because we actually shared a base with the ANA. But as I was saying, just like the amount of spending that goes into the military, like I said, it blew my mind. I mean, even just for PCS moves, the amount of money that we got, just to move from one station to the
Yep.
other, and then you had those guys that would go and buy concrete bags to get a little bit more on the back
When
end.
they weigh your vehicle when you get ready to move. Fill up the gas
Yeah.
tank and, put concrete bags in there. When you get to your new duty station to weigh it out, you go in with just a smeltering of gas. You even pull out the back seats if you can to weigh it. The
Right,
Diddy move,
get
right?
Half the people in the platoon, right? Yeah, half the people in the platoon to go hang out in the back of the U-Haul, but
Yeah.
definitely did not do that. I was 100% kosher. We did everything by the books because I knew if someone was going to get busted, it would have been me.
Yep.
So, but like I said, so when I was in Afghanistan, like I said, just kind of doing the patrols and really just feeling, being there and seeing the people. And I am very proud of my service. I know friends that didn't come back, in
Mhm.
one piece. I knew, we had lost people when I was over there. And it was very kind of a gut punch because my whole military career of a few years was really up to that point. I mean, we were always training to either go to Iraq or Afghanistan,
Yeah.
and everyone wanted to go because it's like, you're on the football team, you're training and you're practicing and you want to get off the bench and get into the game. And that's how we looked at, the combat deployments. And that was my time to get off the bench and to get in the game. But whenever I got to the game, it was thought provoking. And I remember, we were set up at a VCP and I was up in the gun and we had a platoon commander and talking with him, about the goings on of our deployment. I just remember asking him, like, sir, why are we here?
Mhm.
And he looked at me and he just had a very, very deep blank stare and he couldn't give me an answer. It was because that's what you signed up for. And I remember that kind of stuck with me because rewinding in my mind that it's like, everything that we saw with the news or even back home, it was we're defending freedom, that we're fighting for democracy, this, that, and the other. And it's like, here we are in the middle of the desert, trying not to get blown up by pressure cookers. And as far as progress goes, it's like, man, it's kind of like spitting in the wind, as they say. And there was really with my deployment, there was no evident reasons of why we should be there. And, I was an enlisted guy, so my job was to follow orders, not to ask those kinds of questions. It's probably why my platoon commander gave me that look.
Right.
And, but it really kind of made me think that this whole time back home when I was a kid, that it was that we've got to go and we've got to defend, our country and the patriotism and so on and so forth. And whenever we got there, it was anything but. And that's whenever I kind of thought that, along with some of the other things, as I said early in my childhood, that I was like kind of questioning our reality and whether or not with the mainstream narrative, if it was as they said it was. So I did. I got back in one piece, thank the Lord. And as I began to get ready to be separated from the military, I do remember watching the movie Zeitgeist on YouTube. I don't know if you ever saw that one.
Yeah. That came out, what, 2010, 2011 or so?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah,
It was,
about 10 years ago. Yeah.
And I remember them talking about 9/11 and the New World Order and like the Bohemian Grove and all of that. And it was kind of like a holy cow. Like, I think there might be something to this. And it was kind of like an aha moment. And I told my wife, I said, I think I'm done, because at this time she was, I got back and she got pregnant with our firstborn son. And, there's a few buddies of mine that they had kids when we were over there, and my unit was getting ready to deploy again. And I told her, I don't want to miss the birth of my son and get disconnected from you and him. And so I was honorably discharged, and then I got out. And after I, had separated, then that's whenever we really kind of started questioning, several different things. Because back then, that was whenever you had the whole, like, the FEMA camps and the narrative and the IRS and, like, 7 billion bullets kind of narrative.
Yep.
And so it was kind of hard to kind of wade through the reeds, if you will, about what was bogus and what was kind of like, maybe you should pay attention to this. But another thing that really reinforced my questioning of the system was whenever it was time to have our firstborn son, my wife, she had yet again watched another documentary about childbirth and about what goes on in hospitals. And, the whole thing with that they give you the date, they take the woman in, they induce her, give her an epidural, give her Pitocin. Next thing you know, the baby's heart starts to drop, and next thing you know, they have to do an emergency C-section.
Yep. And
it kind of freaked her out a little bit, but we thought, that's not going to happen to us. And lo and behold, almost like clockwork, whenever he didn't come on the due day, but whenever I took her to the hospital, they gave her meds under duress, and then they gave her the epidural because she was in so much pain. And then, my son's heart rate started to go down, so then they gave her the Pitocin to speed up the process. And then, just almost like verbatim of what this documentary said, the doctor was like, well, if we don't get this baby out now, that we're going to have to do a C-section on her. And I had given some pushback at that time, but once he did that, I took the doctor out into the hallway, and we had a little bit of an argument, I guess you could say. And I said, you're not going to put a knife to my life. Mm-hmm. And he was not very happy with the pushback that he got. And but, thankfully, shortly after that, she was able to have him naturally. And it kind of freaked us out that everything came to fruition, just like this documentary said. So whenever it came time for our second child, we opted into the at-home birth. And we actually, came across a great midwife. Actually, funny story, the midwife actually delivered one of Cody's kids from that show, Sister Wives. So
really?
I thought that was kind of interesting, yeah. And so we had that baby at home, and it just everything, no pain medication, no epidural, no C-section, no none of that. And the labor that she went through was, a fifth of the time of the other one. And it was a pleasant experience. And it was like, wow, how could something that is natural, that all of us here on this world, come in to this life this way, and yet whenever it happens, the medical system treats it almost like an illness or a sickness, and it has to be treated with these medications and that medication, versus letting it just happen naturally.
That's a great point. And again, I think I've said this before, people were given birth for thousands of years without a hospital, right? And now listen, there's certainly the chance that something could go wrong, and obviously you'd have to scoop them up and take them to a hospital. But from everybody I've talked to, including my own son, both of his children were, they didn't do home births. They did a birthing center, like in the water, but they were in and out in, I think, 4 or 5 hours each time. It was And the other thing is, I mean, obviously there's a huge, just a monstrous cost difference between having a baby at a hospital and with the midwife, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, like you prefaced before, that the medical industrial complex, it really is just like the military industrial complex, is that they will eke every dime out of you that they can, and you have to get a bedpan, and that's like another $300, like it's insane. How they upcharge, and, or if they bill the insurances, but still, we're still having to pay for the insurances, so their premiums go up.
$80 for an Advil.
Exactly.
That's
yeah.
crazy.
$20 for an aspirin. And so, like I said, yeah, absolutely. I think there's those cases, absolutely, where medical intervention is needed.
Sure.
Like I said, it is anecdotal, but from what happened with our two children, seeing the juxtaposition between the two of them, it was kind of like, holy smokes! Like my wife's body was designed to bear children,
yep.
And whenever it's done naturally, I mean, it was just completely better experience for her and for I. And so after, having our kids and just kind of getting in the run of the mill with work and trying to establish, our family and get to the end of this run of things, I remember it would have been, oh boy, I think probably around 2016, 2017. And I remember my friend saying, "Hey, Brent, like, did you know that some people still believe the earth is flat?" And I chuckled at him. I was like, "Get out of here. Like, that's ridiculous," and it made me think of like the old story about, Christopher Columbus,
going
saying,
off
"Don't
the side.
fall off the edge."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Man, that's kind of stupid." And so it kind of made me think, though, it's like, this is so ridiculous. I have to see how, like, just bonkers this theory is. And I remember, I believe it was an Eric Dubay video that really laid out the whole system, the whole theory. And it, yet again, in my young life, it was another aha moment of like, holy cow. And it made me think back to whenever I was in Cuba, and I remember seeing those boats coming in and out. Another thing that I remember that was always thought-provoking was the flight path that we took. So, like, whenever we flew out, when I deployed to Afghanistan, I remember we had a layover in Alaska. And I thought, I was like, what the heck are we doing in Alaska? Like, are we supposed to be going the other way? And it made no sense to me. I remember watching the little plane tracker and like, okay, like, this is interesting, but why are we going way over here? Like, isn't this kind of out of the way? And then on a separate overseas tour, going to Europe, we went and had a layover in northern Canada and like shot way up north. And then like, boom, next thing you know, we're over in Europe. And I was like, man, this just does not make sense. Like, I thought, the quickest point to point A to point B is, a straight line. And that always kind of bothered me. But then upon watching this video with Eric Dubay, when they showed the Gleason's map, I believe is what it is.
Yep.
When I looked at the flight path of the ones that we took, it's literally a straight line across from our departure to our landing. And I was like, holy smokes, is there really something to this? And after that, I was just kind of hooked, I mean, at first I was just trying to watch this to get a good laugh. And next thing I know, I'm like, oh my gosh, like everything I thought I knew about the world is completely backwards.
Yep.
And, just watching different videos and then kind of cross-referencing them with resources on the internet, one of them being seasons. Like, we live in Arizona, like, in the summer here, like, it gets hot. You can feel the sun, like, on your skin as soon as, like, you step outside, or as soon as it, is up in the sky. And whenever I went, I think it was on NASA, but they were talking about the seasons on the NASA website, and how it's like, well, did you know that during the summertime, the sun is actually, like, over 1 million miles further away than in the winter? And I'm like, dude, whoever thinks that clearly has never been to Arizona in the summertime.
Or the Middle East, right?
Or exactly, or the Middle East, exactly. Because when I was over there, it would have been, in the summer, and I maybe you saw it when you were in Iraq, but I do remember there were times whenever it was kind of hazy that I'd watch the sun, quote unquote, set, but I could see the sun getting smaller and smaller, like it was going away.
Yep.
And I, when I was in, I wasn't on this journey, and I was like, well, why does it look like it's getting smaller? Maybe it's refraction. That's what they always tell you.
It's refraction.
And that just kind of seems to be their answer to everything, just like in the military. If you have anything wrong with you, take Motrin and change your socks.
Yeah.
And so I went down this rabbit hole of the flat Earth, like I said, with Eric Dubay, and I just started watching all these different videos. And like I said, the things that really stuck out were the things of like seasons. And then whenever they were talking about like the rotation of the Earth, we were always told that the Earth is in motion, in school or on the universe with Neil deGrasse Tyson, but it really kind of I never looked at it and analyzed, and I was like, man, if it's moving, like there is no motion, and like you can't feel anything. And then I thought, like, well, wait a minute, whenever I'm on the East Coast and I fly back to the West Coast, like, shouldn't there be like a time difference? It's like, no, it's definitely never a time difference, shorter or longer, unless there's a layover in Atlanta, which is always forever. But I thought, oh my goodness, I need to find out more about this. And that's whenever I just went all in and I dove into it and just started gobbling up every resource that I could. Now, this was before everything had gotten censored. And so I was able to really kind of, I think it was probably at the beginning of the censorship. And as I said, I think back then they had other videos on YouTube, like the QAnon stuff, which I never subscribed to. But I think that's kind of like a red herring that those that will let get out, the misinformation and whatnot. And so I was able to really just kind of absorb all these different videos and these different lectures that these guys had. And it was like, man, this makes so much more sense than with what we've been told, that we're, spinning around over 1,000 miles per hour, orbiting the sun. And, here in Arizona, whenever it's winter, the sun is actually a million miles away further. And I
couldn't be further from the truth.
Right. It was an awakening, and I couldn't get enough of it. And literally, like, as soon as I looked at our world, our realm, okay, our reality in that different light, everything, it makes sense. Yep. I remember as a kid, it's like seeing, I think it was Halley's Comet. I believe it would have been in the 90s, but I remember it passing by and then saying, well, it's going to pass by again, in X amount of years, or it did, hundreds of years before then. And then I got thinking, it's like, well, wait a minute, if we're in this perpetual motion, like, how is this thing cyclical, Exactly. It doesn't make sense. And like I said, I tried to, test things where I could test. Just like you in the military, man, I couldn't even tell you how many different, flights I've been on. And I'm one of those people that always has to sit by the window and looking out there out there into the distance. And it's like, man, there is no curvature out there.
Nope.
It's level. It doesn't matter which continent you're going over, both oceans. It's level as can be. Now, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that reminds me, one of these days I'm going to just dip into my wallet and there's a 1930s popular science, or maybe it was popular mechanics. There's a very infamous magazine, and the cheapest I've ever saw it on eBay is $800. But the guy who took the balloon up and reported how the edge of the Earth kind of like went up at the edges, kind of like if you were looking at the the wall, the ice wall at a distance. I'm trying to type it up here. But where, one question real quick, I want to interrupt you real quick. Where was Flat Earth in regards to your awakening process, as regards to like 9/11, the Federal Reserve and these type of things? Like, had you already looked into those, or was Flat Earth ahead of those?
So Flat Earth would have been more towards the tail end, I guess, unless you want to, include the COVID hysteria of the past 3 years.
Right.
Like I said, the thing that really kind of got me on my truth journey was the food pyramid, and talking with my elders about, like, man, like, have you guys, was it like this when you were young, with people with all these different ailments and cancers and mental illness and people being on the spectrum? And they're like, man, it wasn't like that when they were younger. I mean, is it just because they're looking for it more, or is it because of what's in the food and with what we're eating? And as I said, after I myself was my own case study with cutting out everything that the food pyramid said to eat and having really good results, I was like, I think that there's got to be a connection. And then, as I said, after spending that time in the Marine Corps and going to Afghanistan and these other locations, that we were all sold a bill of lies that we're defending freedom whenever we were fighting goat herders,
Yep.
And at the end of the day, come last year, we end up, handing it on a silver platter to them anyways, with that botched, quote unquote evac that they had.
Oh,
and yeah, like that really kind of put the nail in the coffin of, like, holy cow, the past 20 odd years there. I hate to say it, but it almost was in vain, and it kills me inside because of knowing the loss of life and the loss of resources that went into Afghanistan and Iraq, and that a few short months later, you have those same people saber rattling for us to get involved in Ukraine.
Isn't it amazing? It amazes me. And I always talk about diversions, and a lot of people were talking about Tucker and releasing the January 6th footage, and all eyes were on that. And I was talking to Brent before the show began. I think it was either Tuesday or Wednesday. They had people testifying in Congress about just what we were talking about, the evacuation of Afghanistan. And poor Sergeant E5, who was there that day, who had lost an arm and a leg, was telling Congress that they had already identified the suicide bombers, and they were running up their chain of command, and no one would give them the authority to take those guys out. And it cost 13 people their lives, and many, many more limbs and concussions and things they're going to have to deal with the rest of their lives. It's pretty infuriating.
It really is. And even when I was over there, the ROEs that we had, I mean, it really felt like they send you over there with, one hand, or even at sometimes two hands tied behind your back.
Yep.
I mean, everyone knows, where the fire's coming from. The next thing you know, there's, a couple of guys riding off in mopeds. They're the only ones with, combat boots, and they're all muddy. You're like, I'm pretty sure those are the guys, those are the guys that were shooting at us. And, you didn't dare try to engage them.
No,
unless you tried to work.
Yeah. And you know what? Even as I've gotten older, and I've been out of the game since 2015, and I've had time to reflect, I've thought to myself many times, and I hope this doesn't come off, obviously I would never change anything I did. I did everything with a moral compass over there. But, if Iraqis invaded us and there was a Humvee with Iraqi soldiers, my daughter's playing out by the apple tree we have out front, and there's Iraqi soldiers that drive by 4 times a day in tanks and vehicles, what would we do?
Absolutely. I told my family, it's almost like the movie with Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen, Red Dawn from the 80s, the Wolverines.
Yep. And, they were just doing the same thing against us, man. We invaded, especially in Iraq. I mean, obviously the official story of 9/11 doesn't really add up, obviously. But especially being in Iraq, knowing that we were lied our way in there, and just all the harm that we caused over there.
You're right, and like you said, with Iraq, that's the premise of WMD that clearly never came about. Like I said, the head scratcher I always had was, all the quote unquote hijackers that day were all from Saudi Arabia. It's like, well, wait a minute, Saudi Arabia is a little bit more that way from Afghanistan.
It's not exactly Afghanistan, but their base is in a cave in Afghanistan, so we need to take out the entire country. It definitely has nothing to do with all the heroin that the CIA sells.
Yeah, there's a lot of poppy fields out that way.
Yep.
And so, like I said, the awakening, though, to the flat Earth, it's amazing. There was a point in time, especially whenever I got back, that I did lose my faith for a little while. Just kind of I hate using the word jaded, but kind of found myself in a dark place. And it was interesting that once I came upon this notion of our reality, it, like I believe it's in Psalms whenever, it says that, creation, sings of your praises, or I'm probably misquoting it, but to the effect that we'll know that you're God through your creation. And it's like, oh my goodness, with this knowledge, it's like everything has a purpose, and really, it's like the powers that be, they are doing everything they can to hide God from all of humanity, and really the heliocentric model is, I believe, that is the core column, the core tenet of that belief system. I mean, if you don't have heliocentric model, then you don't have the Big Bang. You don't have Big Bang, you don't have evolution. If you don't have evolution, then everything else that mainstream tells us really gets put into question. It's the house of cards comes tumbling down, and the heliocentric model really is, I believe, the base of it all. And I think that's why it's so vehemently defended. I mean, whenever I have, my wife, I awoken her to the truth, and discuss things with her, and she's her eyes are open as well. And I have a few family members too that I'm proud to say that they, especially like I said with the scandemic that's happened, it also opened up their eyes to, like, holy cow, if they lied to us about this, that, and the other, why in the world would we believe that we're, spinning on a blue marble in the vast emptiness of space,
Yep. And again, if you look at scientism's number, the Bible clearly says that the Earth is about 6,000 years old. Scientism tells us it's 4.5 billion years old, because that's how long it took for evolution. They have to have all their math add up. And of course, they say that the Earth is chasing the sun through this never-ending blackness at 67,000 miles per hour. So if you add that up, we've been hauling butt for 4.5 billion years, and we've never bumped into anything, right? Isn't it just amazing? And by the way, one thing I wanted to add, I will put this link in the show description. The Popular Science magazine from August 1931, and it is the August Piccard aerial record, the 10-mile high view, where he says the edges of the Earth tilt up. So if anybody has $850 they're dying to blow, you can check it out.
That's right, Piccard. I knew
Auguste
you were
Piccard.
referencing that. That's right, Piccard. So I kind of going back to how they're trying to hide God from us, and I think it's so interesting. I've heard other guests that you've had or in your own monologues how people they get really really offended, and they really take it personal whenever you say, hey, you think maybe there's a possibility that we don't live on a spinning ball, and like the visceral and the anger that they have, and they turn it personal, on you. I mean, I'm like, hey man, we're family. It's just a question. Have you ever thought of that? And it's like, oh, well, you're stupid, this, that, and the other. I'm like, look, buddy, I've stepped foot in more countries than I could remember. Most of you haven't left the tri-state area, so
Right.
it is kind of interesting that they, attack that way. But it was really one of the things that I was fascinated with is my grandmother, who's always been very involved in church, and she's been a believer for a very, very long time, and has done things like prison ministry and whatnot. And I showed her this information as well. And after having her listen to my spiel here, my discussion about where we live, she looked at me and she was like, "Oh my gosh." She's like, it all really makes sense, especially whenever you, put it with the word, in that it fits hand in glove with what the Bible says.
It does.
And that we live in a system of intelligent design, and that we're here for a purpose.
Yeah, to people, and again, this is me. I always like to preface this with saying that, I was dead asleep at a point too, and I would laugh off the notion of flat Earth as well, like just about everybody else. But when you think about it, when you read Genesis and then you think, did God create everything and then just set us off 66,000 miles? But the Bible said God's watching us. It was God on his little jet ski above Polaris, keeping an eye on us as we're hurtling through space, and all these little things I think about. And it's really, the more you think about it, the more deceitful, the more evil the heliocentric, system is. And one thing, when we were just talking about Picard, I remembered, I wonder if the whole Star Trek character was a jab at us, because, Auguste Picard was one of the first guys who was nationwide that kind of talked about that thing. Obviously, there was books in the 1800s that spoke about it, and up until the 1500s, everybody thought the Earth was flat. But I wonder if, because you know how the elites, the people who run the show, they like to rub our nose in things. So I wonder if that Picard character on Star Trek was a jab at him.
I think you might be onto something. As you said before in your on your show, that they do make those subtle, those little Easter egg jabs.
Oh yeah,
at the, like you said, just to kind of rub our faces into it, and it wouldn't put it past them, that's for sure. It probably won't be long until they start doing that with the recent COVID hysteria. Right now, there's people that young, healthy people falling over dead, and the latest thing is they're trying to blame it on a sweetener extract that a lot of folks that are on the keto diet use, and they're like, well, maybe it's these people on this fad keto diet that's making them die of myocarditis. Like, it's insane.
I had heard such things if people weren't getting enough sleep. Could you imagine me, 23, not getting enough sleep, and you have a heart attack? I did 15 months in Iraq with about 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. I managed just okay. It's amazing the lengths they'll go to protect themselves. The lies over lies over lies.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of one more point there on the COVID hysteria. It's interesting how they, try to force, taking these experimental vaccines. Like I said, which I was absolutely 100% like, no way.
Yeah.
Just like you, I'm probably one of the most vaccinated persons you'll ever meet.
Yep.
People that are in the military. We had everything under the sun. And I was like, there's no way that me or my family is going to be getting that. And I do believe that, unfortunately, with Trump and Operation Warp Speed, he still does tout the vaccines being a success, but I would not put it past them that come 2024, when people start killing over, that's whenever they're going to reveal it and be like, oh, well, you guys are all dying because of Trump's vaccine, and you got to own it.
That's a good point. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it right now with the lab leak theory or whatnot. I think it makes the most sense, but they call it the theory, right? That it's China, and they're probably going to try to pin that one on Trump too. That, hey, China did this, and you knew about it, and you let them get away with it. But that's my prediction for 2024, is that they're going to turn the vaccine agenda back around on Donald Trump, and they're going to say it's because that man, that your young healthy son or daughter or uncle, whatever it may be, passed away from myocarditis because of the vaccine that Trump made. I'm not trying to give them any ideas or anything like that, but that is my prediction.
It's pretty hard to believe 2024 is next year. It's in like 9 months. It's really hard to fathom. It seems like 2020 was just yesterday, right?
Well, like they say, time flies when you're having fun, right?
Yeah, I guess so. What scares me though is the election. Even I'm at the point. I'm the paradigm of the left and the right. You look at people like Mitch McConnell and all these other Mitt Romney, who's out by your way. It's a uniparty, and there's no respect for our tax dollars. And I'm at the point now where I think, before we do anything else, we all need to concentrate on getting the Federal Reserve dissolved and going back to the Congress, printing the money, because if we didn't have the Federal Reserve, we wouldn't have world wars. Our tax dollars wouldn't be going off to Ukraine, and these endless, meaningless wars would come to an end if we did that.
Absolutely, and I think that it's thought-provoking that that's something that they never teach you, in public school.
Yep.
Like I said, I was home taught, up until high school, and I knew that we were on a gold standard, but we never went in necessarily into the Federal Reserve and the banking systems and how it's, all backed by nothing, really. The guns there in the military, that's about the only thing that it's backed by. But, it's an empty IOU.
It really is.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it's definitely unsustainable with where we're going, and I really believe that they're going to try to use this for justification of a central bank digital currency, which, in my opinion, would be a little bit startling. It kind of is reminiscent to like the mark of the beast.
Very much so. If you thought they could control you now, wait till they can simply turn off your bank account. Going back to the Ted Kaczynski podcast we just did on the other program, he called all this stuff 30 years ago. He really did. He was spot on. He went through a very unusual way to get people's attention, but he knew that this technology, that the way it was evolving, that social credit scores would be a thing. And it's been going on in China for years, and it's just, unless we do something, it's a matter of time before we, it seems like every year since 2020. I remember, New Year's Eve 2020 thinking, finally this year's over, and it really hasn't got much better. In ways it's got systematically worse.
I agree with you on that it just seems that, as soon as you're like, man, nothing else worse can happen, that's whenever it does. So it seems, I thank the Lord that, our family, that we've been protected and shielded from a majority of this nonsense, but it's still something that we have to deal with. And it's frustrating because I know that it's bad now. I don't even want to imagine when my kids are my age. And, right now I do talk with, my kids, about flat Earth, and I teach them, and I've told them before, I'm like, I want you guys to question everything, you can question what I say. I was like, you have to make the choice of what you think is right or wrong, but, look at the evidence, look at, you're a boy, you're always going to be a boy. Like, oh yeah, of course I am. It's like, well, there's some people that, think that that's, a fluid choice, and it's not, and I've talked to him about, like I said, with the flat Earth. It's like, well, okay, son, does it really make sense that we're, spinning 1,200 miles this direction, 66,000 miles this direction, jettisoning, 1.4 million miles this way?
Yeah.
And yet the pond out back is completely still. Like, does that really make sense? You gotta, use a little bit of critical thinking, and that's interesting. I believe it was, the Rockefellers that took over the public education system, if I'm remembering right.
They sure did.
Yeah. But how critical thinking, they don't teach you how to think, but really what to think. And I did see that whenever I went from being homeschooled to going to the public school system, and I do remember getting into debates like with my biology teacher, about evolution versus creation, and to really kind of push back. And it's like, when I would push back, it's like, well, hey, you're the student, I'm the teacher. Sit down and read chapters, 3 through 7, and not really having that discussion of like, well, if it's this way, what about not this way? And instead of getting an answer because I said so, like, show me where your rationale is coming from.
Right. And the whole trust the science thing. Science is never supposed to be, and that goes with everything. We should always question everything. Just because somebody prints it in a book, just because somebody puts on a white lab coat and stands in front of a camera, why should we trust that? These are the things that we need to teach our children. And me and my wife, I think I've mentioned this before, we're putting together a little journal. She's getting it printed through Shutterfly, and it's something we're going to hand down, hopefully, to my children and their children. So maybe in 50 years, when I'm long dead and gone, and the next quote-unquote pandemic comes, and they have this little book that old Grandpa George gave them, and they said, wait a second, he said this might happen, maybe we shouldn't take this, because what really happened back in 1918 with the whole that whole issue, right? We're just supposed to trust the history books and roll up our sleeves, right?
That's a really good idea. I mean, you're right. History is written by the victors, as they say, and I haven't cracked open, a history book or anything like that, but it would be interesting to see what they do say, in the current textbooks about what happened in history that I went through, either, 9/11 or the 2008 financial crisis, and what they will end up saying about even 2020. But I really think that, when it's coming back around to our reality here, living on the plane, that it's important to put the seed, that seed of doubt of what is being taught from the establishment to our kids and to, even our peer groups, but especially our kids. So then that way, whenever they are approached by it, whenever they do, see the brand new image from the Webb telescope, it's like, well, wait a minute, this is says artist rendition, or it's a CGI image. Like, the real image is just like a bunch of blocks.
Yep.
And that was actually another interesting thing too. Like with when I had my awakening, I was like, man, it's kind of interesting. It's like, we've got pictures from space, about with Earth and all that. And sure enough, as soon as I don't use Google anymore, but I went and fired up the Google machine, and you look up pictures of Earth, and it's all, computer generated,
that's right,
animated renditions. You start looking for pictures of planets. It's the same thing. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You're telling us that all this is out there, that, we spent billions and billions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, on these fancy pants telescopes, this, that, and the other. Like, where are the pictures?
Yeah, I remember, was it 2008 or so when I got the first iPhone, and the blue marble, the picture on the iPhone? I'm like, whoa, cool. That's the coolest picture I've ever seen. Then you find out that's an artist rendition.
Right. Like you said, it's like, where are all the pictures? I think there was a picture that came out, oh boy, it was a few months ago, and it might have even been from the Voyager, the so-called space probe that they said that they sent out, that I guess somehow they're still receiving images from it, even though it's only God knows how far away, which is also, I mean, you worked with military radios, you know how great those work. And
the SINGARs, yeah.
Hundreds of millions, if not billions of miles away, but it shows that it literally looks like a blacked out, dusty room, and a little tiny speck of dust that they have to outline. And the headline on the picture says, "You are here." And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's going to be people that just sit there and gobble this up. And like, oh man, look at that! It took a picture of Earth. Like, look how far away it is, without even thinking. Like, am I seeing actual pictures? Is this factual, or is this fabricated? And the blatant obviousness of it, once my eyes were opened, sometimes I think it might even get a little bit frustrating because it's like, man, there's all the evidence. You know, like you said that we're not moving. There is no curve.
No.
You know, the sun and the moon are the exact same size. Like, other than the changing, you know, of the seasons, like you're going to still see Orion and Gemini, like all those constellations. They're going to be in the same spot at that exact same time. Like, if we're having all these different movements, how is it that we have not seen that we wouldn't see different stars? And then the craziest thing is then, you know, they'll come back and say, well, that's because we're actually just kind of looking at ghosts of those lights because we're moving so fast and it takes so long for light to get there. That's actually not there.
That's brutal, man. Go outside, take a picture of the sky tonight, and then March 9th, 2024, look at the picture and look at the sky. Everything's going to be the same.
Right, exactly. And it's like, if we're going through all these different movements, like, don't you think, you know, a little bit of critical thinking, like, we would probably see something different. And you know, I think finally the final nail that sealed the deal was my family and I. We vacationed down in Mexico in Rocky Point, and in Puerto Penasco, and we were there sitting there on the beach, and, you know, just kind of enjoying, soaking up the sun. This was before, you know, all the latest craziness of the stuff going on in Mexico happened, so we felt somewhat safe. But anyway, we were sitting there on the beach, and I was kind of, you know, looking out the direction toward not Mexicali, Baja California. Excuse me, Baja California.
Okay, know where that's at? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was looking, and it's like, okay, well, I can't see it, and there's the water, and, you know, pull up Google Earth, and it's like, okay, well, it's about 100 miles or so from the coastline, you know, back here. And you know what, the craziest thing was, is as the sun was going down, all of a sudden, you could see the hills and the mountains and the coastline, San Felipe Mountains, I believe is what they are. You can see it from the beach right there in Puerto Penasco. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, is that Baja California? And I talked to one of the locals there, one of the folks there at the resort. I'm like, what are those mountains over there? And like, oh yeah, that's Baja California. And I'm like, that's a few hours journey that way. And after calculating the curvature, you know, of like 93 miles or whatever, like that should have been under, you know, well over 1,000 feet of curvature. You know, even if you calculate, you know, the height of the mountains, even at the highest point, you know, you should only be able to barely see the tip, and you could see the full face of the mountain. And when the sun was going down, you could actually see the sun going like behind the mountain range, like it cast that silhouette. Like, dude, that's over, you know, almost 100 miles away, and I could see it, and I was like, there is no curvature. That, like, without a doubt, I should not be able to see that. And then that's whenever I started even becoming more observant. You know, I drive a truck for a living, and out here, I was on the East Coast for a little while, and so I know how everything is just kind of flat and rolling hills and a lot of trees. But out here, I mean, just, you know, big old mountain ranges, hills, this, that, and the other. And on a clear day, if the conditions are just right, I can easily see mountains and hills, you know, and factoring in the actual height of the mountains, you can see the whole mountain face, you know, and it'll be nearly 100 miles away. And it's, you know, with the curvature of the supposed curvature of the Earth, like, I should not be able to see that. That should be hidden, and it's 100% not refraction.
Yeah, that goes without saying.
You know, like I said, if it's a nice clear day outside and not a bunch of chemtrails up there in the sky, it's like, you should not be able to see that, and you do.
And just like that meteorologist on that Chicago weather station, he tried to say it was a mirage.
Absolutely, yes, and that's, you know, whenever I saw Baja California when we were there in Mexico, I was like, well, that did kind of cross my mind. Well, maybe it's that R word, you know, refraction, and then when the sun went literally, like, it cast its rays behind the mountains, you know, and the sun was getting smaller and it was traveling away. It was not setting, it was traveling away. And I was like, oh my gosh.
It's an eye-opener.
This is real. And this, it might be one of, you know, I believe one of the most important things that need to come about, you know, especially bring it back around to the Lord and to faith, I mean, it's all the evidence of God. It's right here. We see it every day. We're immersed in it every day. And it's like just God is there saying, here I am. You are made with a purpose. I love you. Like, it's all right there. But yet the average person is just going to go on throughout their day, waiting for the aliens to come or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, no. That's another thing there, too. It's like with the whole alien nonsense, there was a point in time when I was like, well, I did like the movie Alien, and I liked the movie The Thing, and it's kind of, maybe there is something out there, but like, no, they're absolutely, like, I think we are, just as the Bible said, I think that we are all that's here. Now, I don't know where the end of our plane is.
Right.
I don't think anybody does except for God, so I'm not saying that there couldn't be. I personally don't. I don't think that there is. But it's interesting how, when I was a kid, everyone's any kind of government agency or anything like that, like Area 51, bunch of, mumbo jumbo, there's no little green men. And then sure enough, you got those Navy pilots coming out and they're like, yeah, dude, we're getting into dogfights with these UAPs. And it's like, it's a little bit convenient with the timing. And I believe it was not Oppenheimer, the German scientist that did the modern rocketry.
Oh, Wernher von Braun.
Yes, Wernher von Braun. If I remember right, that towards the end of his life, that he discussed how the military industrial complex, and that we're always going to be looking for someone or something to combat, and he basically said that there's going to come a point whenever they're going to say that there is invaders from another world. And the sad thing is most people, they'll believe it hook, line, and sinker.
Sure, they will.
It's just like they did with the pandemic. And it with the whole COVID thing, it was a little disheartening. There were several people that I always thought had that critical thinking and looked at things a few different angles before going full swing. And man, when they said put on a mask and get your 15 boosters, they were the first ones in line, and I'm like, whoa.
Right.
It really it's interesting. You saw it, like on deployment, you really see people who they are when they're put into situations that are uncomfortable or stressful, and people clamor for someone to take charge and tell them what the heck to do.
Yeah, we always had a joke that they were. We always did our before we deployed. We were either at NTC in Fort Irwin, California, or the one time we were at JRTC in Fort Polk, and we called them training heroes. Right? They had no problem running out, charging a hill when it's blanks, but sometimes the training heroes didn't have quite the same courage when they you get where I'm coming from. But listen, and that's not something we poke fun at. Listen, it's human nature when bullets or bombs or IEDs are going off. It's human nature to cringe and be afraid. When somebody tries to take your life, it's a next level. It changes your life. When a bomb blows up under your vehicle or bullets go flying by, it really changes your perspective on life.
It really does. It changes your perspective, absolutely. I think one of, like I said, that really kind of pointed me towards the truth. Because it's like, me and my guys were all risking life and limb out here. So it's like, we have to know the truth on everything, And, it goes back to God, that he really does, with the Bible, lead us, to that truth. And it's like, it's right there, man. And it's evident for anyone willing to just kind of, pull behind the curtain, take a peek. Yeah. And I think that's something that we need to really do as Christians and as truthers. Even people that aren't, per se, I don't want to say religious, but, they think they don't want to follow, God or, a religion or whatever. that it's still important to really kind of know like who's pulling the strings and what are they looking for, any kind of ulterior motives, and it's important, you know. I mean, even like with churches, I mean, I haven't quite mustered up the stomach to go and I talk to my pastor about, hey, you know, this is some interesting stuff. I want to pick your brain and kind of see what you think on it. But unfortunately, I think that the church, even in the past few years, along with the COVID stuff, there were some churches that were strong in their faith, and there were some that folded up like a paper bat.
Yeah,
and it's sad. It's sad, and it's kind of scary. It's like, you know, they're leading congregations, and people are following them. And whenever push came to shove, they said, "Ooh, I don't want to hold this hot potato."
Yeah, and it's funny. Tucker comes back up, and we talk about he'll tell part of the truth. He won't go the whole way, but I'll give him credit. Either last night or the night before, I saw a clip on YouTube where he actually went out and called out a lot of pastors, asking them where their leadership's been for the last 3 years. So I guess credit where credit is due. We're coming up on our time here in the next few minutes. A couple things I want to ask you before you go. And you kind of answered it, but I wanted to kind of spotlight it. Where in all the rabbit holes that we as truthers go down, how important is Flat Earth compared to the rest of them?
Well, looking at it, Flat Earth is the most important. I think that when you look at it, everything is kind of tethered to it in one way or another. Like you said, without having intelligent design, you know, the powers that be, they can lie and manipulate, and they can, you know, alter our realities with the lies, and people go along with it. But if we know the truth of our reality, it's probably, you know, the most empowering thing that we can do, because like I said, you do away with the heliocentric model, you do away with the Big Bang, you do away with evolution, you do away with you know, all the craziness that's going on right now, where they don't know if you know, or they say that, you know, boys can be girls and girls can be boys, and that it's okay to you know, murder an unborn child, that's justifiable, or that it's okay to take from this you know, small mom and pop shop that have worked, you know, their whole lives barely hanging on by a thread, to come in and tax the heck out of them to go and give to some far-flung nation just to have the money laundered, you know. I think that it is the most important thing, and I think that it's the root of all control in our lives. I really do.
Well done. Well, listen, man, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope we can do this again. I want to first, I'd like to give you the floor to close up this episode with any thoughts or final words that you have for the masses.
Yeah, so I kind of been thinking about this a lot here, and so I want to kind of coin a new term that I'm going to be using. I hope you use it. Maybe it'll catch on. But I think we kind of have a branding issue as flat earthers. Whenever you say flat Earth, people think about that stupid disc, you know, jutting upwards at like 9 feet a second, you know, in infinite space. But the term I'm trying to coin here is plane theory. Plane, like the plane that we live on. You know, I mean, people go on and on about string theory, and really they have no idea what the heck they're talking about. I find it kind of difficult to understand, but rebranding our beliefs, and really with what we see the evidence as that we're on a plane, and that when people hear that, they won't necessarily look at flat Earth as per the Flat Earth Society, but that we not only see the Earth in a different way, but we really see our whole reality, everything from the celestial bodies to the sun to even what's under our feet, that it's a whole new system, and that it could detether the level Earth from space, and then they can get that notion of like Star Wars and Star Trek and aliens and all that stuff out of their minds. But if you got kids, man, I mean, anybody out there that's hearing this, you teach your kids the importance of critical and analytical thinking on everything, and that it's important to question and then verify all that you do, and in every walk of every aspect and every avenue of your life. That always kind of get a different angle on a different vantage point. That it's important. Be involved, whether if that's at your church or heck, I've thought about going out there, and I haven't done it yet. It's on my to-do list, but go out there with the sign, hold it up, are you really spinning at 1,200 miles per hour, going east-west or whatever? And, whenever it comes to, holidays and get-togethers, everyone talks politics and all that. I did vote for Trump both times. I have heard, your thoughts on him, and I do agree to a certain extent. But
I voted for him too. Don't get me wrong. I was all caught up in it, but go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, and I do agree that Trump's done he did a lot of things that probably shouldn't, and we can't put all of our faith into one man, because then we're just as guilty as the other guys. And I think a lot of people, including a lot of Christians, did that. They put all their faith in Trump. Whenever we need to put our faith in God, but we really need to ask the bigger questions and really kind of disseminate the lies at the macro level. Being, hey, you see the sun and the moon? They kind of look the same size, right? Like, how is it that you see the sun and the moon in the same sky, and the moon has the supposed shadow on the earth, but yet it doesn't exactly line up, guys? That's what I would say is to have some critical thinking, really kind of look into it. I'm going to use the term plain theory.
Like it.
Really wrap everything around it instead of the flat Earth, which unfortunately has been bastardized and whatnot with the Flat Earth Society, that counter psyop there that they got going on. But that we really need to not be silent, and that we need to be bold in everything, and to really remember that it all gets roped back around, and the glory is given to God. At the end of the day, people realize, man, I've been lied to about our whole reality. These are the same people that say that this is it, and I'm going to live a hedonistic lifestyle, and that this is it. Like, maybe they're lying. Maybe there is another life after this one, and maybe I need to get my house in order.
Amen, man. That's powerful words, and you've been a tremendous guest. And thank you for your service, and thank you for your honesty. And I really appreciate you sharing your journey through homeschool into the public school. And I just love pushing this out, because there was a lot of people like me who thought there's no way I could homeschool. And I am happy when I see these numbers. The state of Delaware prints them out every year. And every single year since COVID has happened, the homeschool rates have continued to climb. So that makes me really happy. If you can stand by for 1 second, again, thank you so much, Brent, for joining us today. Could you hang on for 1 second while I make a couple comments, because I want to chat with you off air real quick?
Of course. Thank you for having me, George.
Absolutely, Brent. Just two quick notes before we close out. First, I want to thank everybody. Anybody who understands the podcast numbers, it takes a long time for a podcast to get even a little bit successful. Today, March 9th, marks 100 days. Our first episode was November 30th. Today is March 9th, 100 days. In the last 30 days, we've eclipsed 30,000 downloads. That's a big number, and I want to thank everybody. And because it's doing so well, and it's obvious that there's a lot of people who are interested, so we need to keep this momentum going. I did a Rumble channel for my other podcast. And the next week, I will put together a Rumble channel for the Flat Earth Files podcast, because we need to start being able to reference people to videos. These conversations are tremendous, but we need to start having our own versions of videos, maybe even some conversations on video, so people can go, instead of sending people off to other, I reference David Weiss a lot, but I think it's time I start doing some of my homework and putting together some videos as well, so we can continue to grow our little movement here. And I think that was it. Yep, that's it. So again, thanks to Brent for joining us. Thank you to all the listeners. Please share this podcast with your friends. Like Brent was showing, we have to have the courage to, stand with our convictions and say the things that we believe. And I believe that we are on a level plane. And I've shared it with you, and I hope you share it with your friends and your loved ones. Until next time, I'm George Hobbs. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, my friends, keep your head on a swivel, and we will see you.
You're listening to the Fact Hunter Radio Network.
Just the facts, ma'am.